mention.
I would copy and paste it. See if it matches.
We'll call this committee of the whole meeting to order on July 23rd, 2024 at 6 p.m. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, is there anybody who'd like to speak under public participation this evening? Okay, for the record, there is no public participation this evening. We will start the agenda tonight with item number 4. It's the 145 Influent Pumping Station upgrade. Mr. Bounds.
So this is the first phase of construction for the capital improvement plan that we discussed last year that CMT's done engineering on. This is going to be a replacement of the existing bar screen, a replacement of the existing grit apparatus that was not replaced during the CSO upgrade, replacement of all the influent gates down at the influent pumping station so we can actually isolate out processes and perform maintenance, whether that be preventative or corrective. It's also going to be a replacement of the SCADA system and alarm system. The SCADA system would be the central nervous system of the influent pumping station that blends all the different parts and pieces together and tells it how to work. You know, whether it's opening this valve at this set point or closing this gate to this set point to make sure it all operates correctly. We solicited these bids. We projected a spend of $1 million on construction costs. The low bid was received from Plockers Construction at $1.499 million, so roughly $500,000 over the original estimates. That is currently not in the budget. I sent a supplemental email to all of you about adjusting the appropriations amount for the equipment line item in an amount of $500,000 to compensate or to encompass this project. You may be asking why the line item would be increased to 1.98 as opposed to just 1.5. There are other projects planned within that budget this year. So that would encompass the other $480,000 there. All of these are required upgrades. It is nice stuff, but it is just replacing what has failed over the last 20 years or is in the process of failing. In the case of the bar screen, for those of you that remember, back in January, we actually did a $12,000 emergency repair that just replaced 2 guide brackets on it. That bought us enough time to get through this construction is what it did. What else are we looking at? The Sewer Enterprise Fund currently sits at $7.549 million in reserves. It can adequately support this construction project. In the email or the memo I discussed, so why wouldn't we rebid this, right, since it didn't come in towards estimate? There is no real financial benefit to bidding this. You can see from CMT's memo on, I believe, the 6th and 7th page that it has a cost breakdown between the bids. The bids were fairly tight. I believe there was a margin of error between bids of roughly $186,000. So rebidding it is not going to produce us a more beneficial bid. If we were to rebid it with a reduced scope, as in taking out a piece of the process or equipment that's being replaced, that doesn't provide us any benefit either. This is all stuff in here that absolutely has to be replaced. I think that's what I have for now. I'd like to turn it over to Christy, if you're okay with that, for her to touch base and then go to questions.
Hi, Christy.
Hello there. Good evening, everyone. As far as the differential in the bids, I will be the first one to tell you that right now it's incredibly hard to figure out where the bids on any project are going to come in particular on a small project. We were very fortunate. We had multiple contractors bid here recently. We've been happy to get 2. I think we had like 4 bids. And the fact that they were all so close together, unfortunately or fortunately, means that the price is the price. I will tell you that we've had several projects where owners have chosen to rebid, and it will never be less. Time is money right now. So we highly recommend you take the bid because it will not get less expensive as we go along. For a different client, we got a cost on a small generator, and in 4 months it went up $30,000. So it's the time that we're in. It's the fact that commodities are more expensive, and the fact that contractors have a lot of work and they're putting in real profit these days. So happy to answer any questions.
I just wanted to point out that, and Andrew can correct me if I'm wrong, but nearly all of this stuff that's being replaced is 20-plus years old.
Everything is over 20 years old. And some of it we're actually putting back probably a little bit higher quality than what was put in to begin with.
Mr. Parrott?
Chrissy, can you tell us how you came up with the $1 million estimate to begin with, or kind of that idea, and then how do we get to 1.5? I mean, that's a big difference.
Absolutely. So generally speaking, we will, when we're doing the design, reach out to the manufacturer of the equipment, and then we get a price from those manufacturers. And then generally speaking, we don't even call it we call it an opinion of probable construction cost, because we really don't put the numbers together the way a contractor would. We're generally, for installation, using percentages of the overall construction cost, and that was where most of those discrepancies came in, as well as we'll do the cost, we'll come up with an installed cost, and then we have a line item that we call general conditions, which is encompasses overhead and profit, bonds, insurance. In this particular project, it was 18%. And I think part of that is just because the ultimate dollar amount has to be worth the contractor's time to mobilize in and come into town. So I think it's just the fact that on a small project, that percentage was a lot more than what we had ever intended or thought that it would be. I can remember 10, 12 years ago where it was 5% of a sizable project. So I think it's just a lot of factors adding on top of others. And I think that the contractor feels it's a little bit more complex to do the work. In particular, I know the cost to demo, take out the screens that are down in there, and then the cost to reinstall was significantly. We actually asked the contractor for their breakdown of costs so we could do a line item comparison. And actually the equipment was less than we estimated. It was all in the installation and then that overhead.
Will the installation take just longer than you guys estimated, or is it?
I think it's just in complexity and perhaps in the amount of time that they're thinking that it's going to take. Again, we usually do ours. I mean, if you have a piece of equipment and you say 50% of the cost is what it's going to take to install, and then they get into it and they actually have manpower breakdowns and they go through that whole process. So theirs is definitely a different level of complexity to the way that they go through and do those costs. Which, we try our best, but, we're only as good. What I do love about these was actually the fact that there wasn't one way over here and one way over here and they were all bunched together, as well as the fact that the low bid contractor is the contractor that actually built the building. So it makes you feel kind of good to know that they were comfortable enough to come back and want to do this work within the building and the design that we did before.
Thank you.
Mr. Eimer?
You say the contractor that built the building?
So yes.
Well, I understand 20 years ago that that's what the problem is. They didn't do it right in the first place.
They actually, so what happened 20 years ago was and this is just my recollection, I wasn't part of it, grabbing the plans, the firm that was operating it was doing like a design bid build type of process, and when they did the overall design of the plant, it came in more than what the budget was, so they actually removed the building that was around the bar screen and the grit. So basically, instead of it being enclosed in a building and protected from freezing temperatures, it was actually left open and exposed. So as part of our CSO project, we bid an alternate to come back and put a building around the equipment. And that's the building that we're talking about. We basically came in and put the shell around the equipment, somewhat similar to as it would have been designed 25 years ago.
So this company wasn't the one that did the upgrade 20 years ago?
No.
No. They did the CSO improvements that we finished just a couple years ago.
Ms. Rolfs?
This all has to be done at the same time. I mean, it's not a project that you can do a little bit at a time. It all has to be done.
Well, this is all being
One
done,
year.
this is actually all being done within the confines of that headwork structure. And so it really all makes sense to do it all together. The problem, if you really start breaking those projects out and making them even smaller, is that cost to the contractor to come into town and do business will continue to go up. So you want to take them in sizable chunks to get the interest. Honestly, I was really concerned that we weren't going to have that many bidders, just because, well, you know, it's right now $1.5 million project isn't a big project, and in particular to attract Plocker Construction to town, we were pleasantly surprised that they came out and bid. So
Okay. Any other questions for Christie or Andrew?
One note on this, everyone. If we get detailed questions or something, as opposed to trying to address means and methods, I've got no issue discussing that up here. But if we've got specific questions on specific pieces that are in the packet, if you go through the memo, there's a breakdown on most of the larger pieces of equipment being broken. If I could have those questions sent to me, time to prepare. If we have more coming up before voting session, I would appreciate that immensely.
Okay, so I'll place this on the regular agenda. Okay,
thank you guys.
okay. Next item up is item number 5, Economic Development Grant Approval. This is for Mystic Greens, IND Capital LLC, 1120 Woodlawn Road, front entrance repair replacement in the amount of $7,500. This particular grant went before the Economic Development Grant Commission. One of the questions that was raised was, is anything that was approved by the commission part of the fire that took place at the property? And the items that have been approved are not. These are items that they were going to bring forward to us anyways, and they have to do with brick, the front door, and some replacement, the entrance portion of that. Ms. Rolfs, Mr. Hoblet, or Mr. Woodhull, or Mr. Conzo, anything to add? They're all members of the commission as well. Okay, so place this on the regular agenda? Okay. We'll place item number 5 on the regular agenda. Okay, next up is item number 6, purchase of a new 2023 Dyne APAC CC950 steel roller. Mr. Landers.
Yes, the purchase of this machine is to replace the 1977 Rex roller that we currently have. The smaller machine will allow us to trailer the machine, move it from place to place, because normally when we do hot mix asphalt repairs, we probably have 2 or 3 of them going on at one time. And this allows us to move that machine from place to place where we currently have to drive the large roller. Driving across the streets with a steel drum and rubber tires isn't the most comfortable thing. But the concern is too also the age of the machine and you know, having to repair it and being able to get parts and things as old as it is. So, you know, and then also the smaller machine allows us to do smaller cuts. But most of our street cuts are smaller. It allows us to be able to get inside those cuts and use the machine inside without having to remove excess material. And this is a machine that'll be shared, cost shared between the sewer department and the street department, and used by both employees of both departments.
Mr. Bateman?
What are we doing with the old machine?
I would assume we'll probably put it on surplus property.
Well, I hope we do that, because I gotta drive by the old street sweeper twice a day, sitting out at the landscape waste facility, so if we're gonna just scrap something, we should just scrap it quickly instead of storing it.
Mr. Eimer?
What's the price of this machine?
It's there in the memo. The cost is $33,010.60.
And did you want to mention the Sourcewell contract?
It is on a Sourcewell contract. We received a 28% discount in the amount of $10,354.40.
Is this in the budget?
Yes.
And he's got the line item in the memo as well.
I have both the street department line item and the sewer department line item.
Any other questions for Mr. Landers? Place it on the regular agenda? Okay. Place item number 6 on the regular agenda. Next up is item number 7, fencing and automatic gate operators. Mr. Bounds.
So this is actually both Mr. Meister, Mr. Landers, and myself. What I'm asking you for tonight is 2 new gate operators. One to add to the existing sewer plant gate that is the largest gate that the city has and is the only manual gate of its size in town. It's a safety concern for that. The other gate operator is being asked for the new impound lot for police cars down there. This would be the lot directly across the street from the entrance to my plant. As you can see, we have 1 vehicle there right now. The fencing is needed to close this property in and make it a secure facility. That's a general assessment. I'm asking for an approval amount of $108,591.12. No, the bids do not currently add up to that, but there is no electric service down there right now for the city outside of 1 light on either, and that is a huge cost for this. There are quotes for both the fencing, gate operators, and electrical in here right now, but we know we're going to come up against some other things as we're doing this. That's what
Chief?
we're asking for.
Anything to add, Chief?
Not much. I think Mr. Bounds covered it pretty good. Obviously, with storing vehicles that we've impounded in that lot, it is absolutely necessary to purchase fencing to secure the lot. And in the future, I'll look at providing some camera equipment for added security measures there. But without the fencing, it really won't work out for what our plan is as far as an impound lot.
And this is the property down by the Rubicon, correct?
That is correct. It's the tiny triangle piece of property directly across from the sewer plant entrance.
Okay. Questions? Ms. Rolfs?
Does this have barbed wire on it?
Yes.
Because I was asked over the weekend, what is the city spending money on having a barbed wire fence? I said, I don't know yet.
So that piece of property, keep me honest, was used as a laydown area during CSO, correct?
That is correct. It does have some rock base left in there. We are going to have to bring in more material to address the base where the cars are parked. You know, the parts that do not have base in them right now. We don't want to be putting citizens' impounded vehicles in a place where we get a heavy rain and it sinks into the mud or causes other operational issues for the police department.
Mr. Reimer?
It was our old stockpile, to be exact, back when I worked out there. That's what we used it for. But where's the money coming from for this fencing and this project again?
It's coming from 2 separate line items, one from the police and one from the sewer for the street and sewer portions of this.
And the money's there, there's no problem with doing this then?
That is correct. This was a planned budgeted item from the start of the budgeting process.
Place this on the regular agenda?
Yes.
Okay. Place item number 7 on the regular agenda. Okay, next up is item number 8, creation of line item in appropriations for matching grant opportunities. Ms. Metelko, do you want to join us at the table? Okay, so I'll kick us off. Mr. Conzo's been involved in this as well as Ms. Metelko. We were having a parks meeting. We have a parks committee to address parks, and during that meeting recently, this topic came up. It wasn't specifically about parks, but more about the fact that Ms. Metelko was brought on to help us with grant writing, among other things. And it became very clear that during the discussion, and we've spoke at other times about this as well, that we need to start getting proactive when it comes to grant writing and doing some prep work, because not all grants are just simple where you just apply and you either get it or don't. For instance, if you remember, we tried to do a crossing across the highway by the fairgrounds and the hospital, and we came to the council and asked for some design money so that we could apply for that grant. We did not get that grant, but now we have that design work done, so that particular project is shelf ready. So if another grant opportunity comes forward, then we've done the pre-work that we need to do. And so that's kind of a lead into the conversation here. Mr. Conzo, did you want to go, or do you want to go first? It doesn't matter to me.
You can, it's fine.
Chuck, do you want to weigh in on it from the treasurer's standpoint?
Yeah, really not much that I have to say about it. I know we talked about it. I talked with Ms. Metelko about it, and you've summarized kind of where we are with it. I've advised the other members of the budget committee of it, and as a result of that, it's following that also, I have put it in the document that you have before you, the appropriation document that you have before you, and it's under the economic development sub-fund within the general fund. So if you look at that, you'll see there's grant matching expenditures in that line item. I can give you the page number if you want. It is page 7 of the main document, the budget appropriation document. Under economic planning and development, there's a line added there at the very bottom of that sub-fund, grant matching expenditures with an appropriation of $100,000.
Can you give us that account number?
Okay, that is, just after I close this.
I'm sorry.
That's quite all right. We don't have a line number for it yet, but the fund number is 02-3000. Okay. And it's page 7. It's at the very bottom of that page.
Thank
We'll
you.
have to assign it. Assuming it's approved, we will assign it line number which the city clerk will create. But there's not much point in doing that if it's not approved. So
Agreed.
we will proceed accordingly with that.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Metelko?
So going through a bunch of the grants, looking at them and what they require, they are wanting us to have an engineering design and all that done first to submit with the grant. There's a lot that goes into it. They ask for a lot. Just as an example, looking at doing an amphitheater over at the 8th Street lot. In order to submit for that, I have to have the engineering done, and that's, about $32,000 to get that done just for that project. I'm only mentioning this project because it's the only one I have right now. But you have to have that work. You have to have that done, that plan, the master plan, all of that in order to submit for these grants. So, and a lot of the time, the money that you pay for this is not reimbursable. It's the project, once you move forward, that becomes eligible for reimbursement on the grant. A lot of them are 50-50 on the matching that I'd seen. But I need money, to be able to do the engineering for whatever projects we want to do to apply for grants.
Mr. Parrott?
Thank you. So on this particular project on 8th Street. Is this a 50-50 match?
Well, depending on which grant I'm going for, the one I was looking into was a 50-50.
So then what type of project would we, and you say that there's a $32,000 engineering cost for this particular?
For this one, yes. The total cost was about $200,000 and $32,000 of it was just the engineering portion of it.
So 200-some thousand, 30,000 is from engineering, so 170,000, so half of that they would match, so we're looking still quite a bit of money that the city would have to
Yeah,
come up
so-
with. We're looking like $100,000 to the city if we did get this grant.
Yes.
The city would have to come up with to make it come to fruition.
Yep. So that, because that's a very good point, and Ms. Rolfs and I exchanged an email, and I think the way that I led into it, at least an email that I shared with you, led everybody to believe that this is just a parks thing. It's bigger than a parks thing. This kind of goes back into our whole economic development approach in growing the community and putting amenities and things out there that the community would want to use. Like the dog park was a great addition, and we're trying to grow that 8th Street lot. To the point of one of the individuals that spoke with Ms. Rolfs, yes, we've done a lot of good work on our parks, and thanks to Ms. Metelko and the Parks Committee, and we did have ARPA funds to do that. But the conversation became more of a broad conversation in the fact that she's repeatedly asked me, I can go out and get grants, but what do you want me to get grants for? And that's a valid question because she really needs to know the things that are important to the council. So in lieu of let's say a strategic plan, which we don't have right now, and need to work on, we need to at least prepare Ms. Metelko so that when she sees grant opportunities, that she has those tools available to her to move us forward. This particular project is, and it'll be managed the same way that future ones will, is we take ideas. This was an idea in the Parks Committee that perhaps in one of the corners we could put an amphitheater. Makes it sound like this big grand thing. We're thinking more of like a pavilion, something that's more smaller scaled, like the theater. The Lincoln Theater could do a play out there. You could get an acoustic show, things like that. So we were trying to create another amenity in the park, or at least an idea. Now, we've talked with some of the engineers about what that could look like, and we've got some mock-ups. But at that point, then we need to come to the council and say, here's an idea that's been presented. Do you feel that it's worth moving the community forward? And if so, can I get approval? If the council gives that approval, she's going to have funding to do the design work, because in many of these grants, one of the requirements to even apply is, have you got your funding sources earmarked? You need to show us proof that you've got funding, and also design work. Some of them won't even take your application without approved design work. So she's done some work and talking with the parks, and jump in any time, but they've learned that, for instance, Springfield, they've got tons of projects that are shelf ready that they've been working on over the years. And so at any time, if their grant writers come across a grant, they've now got a project they can pull off the shelf and submit for to get funding if their council approves that. It's kind of the approach that we're trying to go with this particular topic. So really what we're trying to do is we're trying to provide tools for economic development in the grant writing program. Mr. Eimer.
How long when you say it's put on the shelf, how long is that good for them? Forever, or
Just like
is there
the
a period of time? Or?
Well, just like the conversation we had before with the wastewater treatment plant, it's time, money, and materials. So once you get design work done, a lot of that design work, here's what needs to be done. Cost will obviously go up over the years. So
It'll stay on the shelf. Might be there 5 years, and it could give her the step that she needs to.
yeah, so if there was an alderman that's come 2 years down the road and said, you know what, hey, remember that amphitheater or that pavilion that we were talking about? Let's move forward with that. Okay, we've already got the design work done. That's the idea. We're trying to prepare, because Ms. Metelko, to her credit, does actively scour for grants. Her and I constantly talk about this. But the answer, a lot of it is, keep me honest here, no, we don't have design ready. No, we don't have funds set aside for it. So we're really asking her to do a job for us, and that was part of the requirement for her job, but we haven't given her the tools to properly do her job. So that's what this request is based on. Ashley, have you anything to add?
And if you have any projects or any things that you would like to see, me look for in grants, I need to know, somebody can give me an idea, then I can look, find the grants for it, see if I can bring it to the council. Here's the idea that we have, and, see if everybody wants to move forward with it. But I don't really have any ideas of what anybody's, looking for. I have the pavilion for 8th Street, and not everybody might not agree with that, but it's a project, to bring forward. And if you have any other ideas of where you want, to grow the community.
Mr. Bateman and then Mr. Parrott.
So back on the parks thing, one of the other, it's an afterthought because it's just sitting there. We have the piece of land on 3rd Street. I've talked with Mrs. Metelko about like a skate park there. Just a sidewalk that's up and down and curved for kids to ride scooters and skate parks on. There's some of them in Springfield already. Those kind of things, once this line item is created and we have funds in there, then we can, at least when she's applying to the grant and it comes to funding source, we can, here's the line item, this is the funds available, and then if we need engineering, at least we got funds to go pay for engineering, because every grant's different. And then I just want to point out, this is not just for parks. There's, there's grants for
EV
replacing
charging
windows,
stations.
charging stations, equipment, all kinds of things. There's all kinds of grants for all kinds of things. The problem we had was we never had a specific line item that we can always point to and say, this is our source of our funding. A lot of these grants, you can't just say, well, I'll apply for the grant and then I'll go to the council and see if they'll give us some money. You got to have a funding source available, and that gives her the means of explaining this is the funding source for whatever type of grant we're going for, whether it be 50-50, 100%, 60-40, whatever. We just didn't have the line item to facilitate that.
I think it's also a great way for the council to make a clear decision on this is how much we would like to budget for this year by way of projects or improvements. It could be we don't feel that we want to do anything this year, and maybe we only put 5,000 in there. It could be another one where we put 50. It just depends on the appetite of the council, but at least it gets us moving in the right direction. Right now, we don't have anything at all by way of that. And also, I think, some of us have been up here a while, and we know that you bring topics before the council that aren't really baked out. It just becomes a free-for-all up here by way of conversation, and I think this approach will lend to better conversations with better content and outcomes. Mr. Parrott, and then Ms. O'Donoghue.
No, I agree. I think we should probably come up with something like a budget for something like this. My only question would be, and I don't know the complexity of this pavilion, amphitheater, or whatever. 32,000 seems like it's that's quite a bit of engineering costs. I think for a pavilion, could we use that money rather than go for grant? Is you said 50-50? You said okay.
Well, so it's 50-50 reimbursement, but it could be so much as we put in for that and you submit all the work that's been done, and not all of it may qualify. That's why they still want your funding source. So, but they're not going to reimburse us for the engineering costs for sure.
Okay.
And
That's something we have to fork.
yeah, and to add to that, to your point about how expensive that is, a lot of it is because of the grade of that property. So to build a structure on a property with varying grades, that was part of the conversation as well. We had some good conversations in that Parks Committee just simply about location and where it could even go with minimal engineering work, where it would lay out nicely with the other things that are out there. Yeah. So, and it's not meant to be this full big blown thing, and I don't want this conversation to become about that. But we tried to be, I thought, conservative in the approach of that project.
Was that because the brick was all buried in the ground? Is that what part of the problem is?
Well, that's part of it. Yeah. Miss O'Donohue.
So we're asking her to do a job, to get grants, but for us, and it's one of the biggest things that irritates me sitting here, is there is no strategic plan for the city. We don't have a 1-year plan. We don't have a 5-year plan. There's no 10-year plan of what anybody even wants the city to look like or what needs to be done. And until we have some sort of strategic plan, a committee that gets together to discuss what a 1-year plan looks like, a 5-year plan, and a 10-year plan, I'm not voting to give any money for anything to just sit.
I got one. What about the pension fund? We got 14 years to do that. We don't seem to have a plan for that either. Where's your view on that?
We don't have a plan for that. That doesn't mean that I'm any happier with that either.
I disagree. You know, I keep hearing about these pensions and we're doing nothing. Mr. Conzo and I have taken steps to at least try to address the problem and get a grasp on how much we owe and how much we need to set aside. That's never been done before. The only time we've talked about pensions on this floor is during the tax levy time, and then pensions become a topic of debate. And then after the property tax levy increase is addressed and approved at any level, then it just goes away.
Are we putting the amount in that we're supposed to then?
The first step is we need to understand how much to put in. And that's why I've worked with Mr. Conzo, and he is working with another company to get a schedule put together to tell those of you on the council, if we're going to meet this deadline by 2040, you got to start putting this amount of money back every year. Yeah, but prior to that, it really wasn't prioritized. So, yeah. Okay. I had a lot of hands go up. Mr. Hobble, I think, was first, and then we'll go down the line.
Ms. O'Donoghue, I'll speak with you after the meeting. I have recently been put in contact with the firm that actually specializes in helping municipalities form 5, 10, 20, and 40-year plans. So that might be an option for us in the future.
Ms. Rolfs and then Mr. Conzo.
I think it was during my first year, which had been 3 years ago, I asked about a strategic plan. And because we had had one before when I was on council. And council at that time did have one in 2020.
There was one put together.
So there was one in 2020, which was just prior to us. That meant that another council, people that were on that council, had done the strategic plan, and some of those are no longer, were not elected or put back on council. So when we talk about doing a strategic plan, do we do one for the next council that comes in, if that changes, or do they do it? So I think determining when it would be appropriate to do the strategic plan, but I'm a big believer in doing strategic plans, and there just hasn't seemed to be the interest in doing that. And when you do that, then you do take the budget into consideration, because I'm saying, well, we just sat here and went through budget time, and we didn't talk about this issue at that time, and we should have, because it's something that if we think this is important, then we put that in the budget at that time rather than bringing it up at appropriations. I'm somewhat in agreement with Rhonda that it's hard for me to sit here and say, yeah, we're going to come up with now another budget line item to do something, when what do I hear out in the community? The streets, the streets, the streets, the sidewalks, the sidewalks, the sidewalks, the curbs, so those are things that you hear, and it's like, are there any extra funds anywhere that we can do those things? Or is that all pretty well in a box, and people need to understand it's in a box, and we can't impact that box anyway other than the way it's being. But when you hear people say that if they come to Lincoln, they sure would like to have people notice that we have nice streets and that our neighborhoods are nice. And so, again, the focus should be on the council that's gonna make those determinations for what you do, or for what's done, and are we the ones that should be doing it for next year?
Oh, we can do it at any time. It serves us as well. I don't recall getting a email from anybody saying, can we pull in a company and do a strategic plan? Now, maybe I'll take the blame for some of that as well. Perhaps I should have just ran with that myself. We've been running with a lot of fires over the last couple of years. And to the roads topic, I don't disagree with you, Ms. Rawls. Our roads could use some TLC. And I think I shared this with you in the email, was that when I came on the council, I think we were putting 300,000 into roads every year. We're now at least putting $1 million into roads. If the council wants to get aggressive and pause all forward progress economically, we can have a very serious conversation about taking a bond out for $30 million, and we can do every road in the city of Lincoln. If we really want to get serious about roads, I'll be right there with you to do it if you want to do it. But I just don't know that this community, number one, I think it would be deemed as highly irresponsible. And I don't think that the community has an appetite for that aggressive of an approach. So if we want to start earmarking more money for roads, then budget time is the time to do it. Let's do it. But you're right. We do hear that same topic. Mr. Conzo, were you next?
I think
And
so.
then Mr. Parrott.
Well, he can go next if he wants.
Okay, Mr. Parrott.
I think perhaps it was probably Mr. Conzo and myself. We were, was it 8.5 years ago? We did a strategic plan in Bloomington, although I think we probably got in trouble for going to Bloomington. But we did, I think it was, I don't know if it was U of I that came and ran the strategic plan, for us. I'm not for sure exactly what happened to that plan, but that was a pretty in-depth process that we did at that time. And I think there was just some changes that took place. Obviously, I think we got a different mayor. Mayor Snyder was gone, soon thereafter, I believe. And so things just didn't, go anywhere with that.
Clay was gone.
Yep. So.
Yeah, Steve, that's actually out there. If you go out there and do a search for strategic plan, you can find a copy of our strategic plan, the last one that was done. I know there was one done after I came on the council, because we went out to the hospital and we had a meeting out at the hospital, and that was probably 2017, maybe somewhere in there. So, yep. And I will say this too. The strategic plan, there was an approach by Dane Dalpaz when he was on the council and Mr. Keller to do it, but it became a contentious thing because in the past, it was deemed that strategic plans were really only plans for not everybody's vision. It might be the best way to put it. And I think that could be a reason why the strategic plan never got brought back up. But I think now we're starting to see we need to do it. Mr. Landers and then Mr. Eimer.
Yeah, the meeting at the hospital was a follow-up of the same strategic plan. It was all in the same package.
Like a review.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mr. Eimer.
It was over there on Pulaski Street and all them curves. Was that part of a strategic plan? Is that what that?
Yeah, the downtown.
Probably what's left the bad taste in.
Plan for 3 people and not the rest
Yes.
of the world.
The downtown
That's why I think
revitalization plan.
having a problem. I'm not saying it's a bad idea to have one, but I think that was the theater part of that too and everything. Yeah, it left some bitter taste of
I
that.
would vote for a strategic plan that redoes Pulaski Street and put it back the way it was.
Well, well, that's going backwards. But if you looked back at the time, we had this conversation about the parking lot, and we're kind of going down a rabbit hole here, but the library alley, the parking lot, the big grand master plan for the parking lot and all of that stuff, and then the whole Save Our Alley movement. that revitalization plan you're talking about had all these little things called pocket parks throughout the community as well. And it was just, it wasn't, I'm just saying it wasn't well received. And I've got a copy of it if you'd like to take a look at it sometime. Yeah, it's full, it's got a lot of interesting drawings and concepts and things like that. I'm not saying that it's not good to have a vision, but I'm just not sure that the vision that was presented before was what everybody else would like. And I think that's why it was met with opposition. Mr. Conzo?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, first thing I was going to talk about was the pensions that Alderman Eimer mentioned. What we're doing is we have that annual report that I present prior to the approval of the tax levy that shows what we need to contribute. But this is going to take it a step further, the thing that the mayor was talking about, and it'll give us an amortization schedule of what we need to pay to put into it each year to be 90% funded or be 100% funded by the year 2040. So this would be a more detailed version of that. It wouldn't be just, this is what you need to put in. It would be a more step-by-step process outlined in this plan. We won't have that until we get a few months further into the year because there are other reports that have to be done in conjunction with the audit. As we came up with this idea, it was toward the mayor did, it was toward the end of the previous fiscal year. So the data we would have been using at that point would have been from the year before that, the 22-23 year. So now what we would do would be subsequent to the audit for the 23-24 fiscal year, we would use those GASB reports and the things that we get from the auditors, and those would be used to calculate the schedule. So we should have it prior to, or you'll have it prior to the tax levy proposal.
Would you go ahead?
Oh, well, I was going to talk about
I just
the
wasn't trying
strategic plan
to
too.
beat a dead horse with the pension.
I think you're absolutely
yeah,
right.
we just have an obligation to them two departments, and I'm retired, and I know what it'd be like if it wasn't there for we owe it, and so it's just I just don't want people to forget about it. It's a responsibility that we have to face. So,
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I have always tried to make police pension and fire pension a priority, and I think it should become even more of a priority before we slide further and further behind. Thank you. The other thing I was going to mention was that strategic plan. Part of the reason that it didn't go over very well is it was extremely expensive, and you've got to weigh that against what you can afford. It's nice to want a Cadillac or a Chrysler or something if you can.
Or Lincoln?
Or a Lincoln, yeah. Yes, that's even better.
No pun intended.
But if you can't afford it, you can't afford it, just like a lot of things. And so we have to keep that in mind as to what we can afford and, when we're drawing up that strategic plan, because it's only as beneficial as to the extent that you can pay for it.
Yeah, and I pulled it up. And I'll send this to the council, a copy of it, because you got to kind of look for it. But the strategic areas in here is communication, economic development, infrastructure, and quality of life. Those are the 4 pillars of the 2020 strategic plan.
That's why I've got that one.
Yeah, and the green one. And while the quality of life, yeah, and while we don't have a strategic plan, I would say that we are addressing some of these items just through other committees, like quality of life. We've got our downtown safety initiative. We've redone our parks. Infrastructures, we have our grant programs, economic development, we're working with LEAD. We're doing a lot of this, it's just not packaged up in a plan. And so it would not be a bad idea for us, to Mr. Hoblett's point and Ms. O'Donohue's, to just get it documented. Yeah. Ms. Ralston, then Ms. McClellan.
Well, I kind of wanted to get back to Ashley, because I know she's kind of wanting probably an answer or some direction from us as to where to go, and I'd like some clarification.
Yes.
If we looked at possibly having money available to put into whatever he's talking about sitting on the shelf, then does that stay there, and as she takes ideas or gets ideas, we look at that pot of money and say, well, we don't have money to do this, where we do have money to do this. I mean, how is that process supposed to work for her? So,
So you can answer.
I
this
mean,
if
we
you'd like.
can't say, okay, well, there's $100,000, or actually have fun.
Okay, well, the only project I have is the pavilion for over there, so I would say, hey, there's a OSLID grant or whatever that's available, come forward with everything to do with the pavilion, give you all the information that you need, and request to spend the design engineering and the construction engineering cost out of that, that line, I should say, in order to get that to be able to submit for the grant. And if I miss it this year, when it comes back around, I have it all ready to go, and I can just pull it and submit it.
So we do not have any money at this time put into a budget for that. Your request is to put in money in the appropriations now, as we're getting ready to do that. And I do think that this is very important that this discussion happens, because I'm sure that the rest of the people do get the same questions I get about where are we getting all this money? You know, and that was a question that was asked. Where were you getting the money to do this? Well, out of this pot. So I would look for advice from Mr. Conzo to tell us where we would have money to draw from to put into that fund.
Mr. Conzo, and then Mr. Hoblet.
Thank you, Mayor. In the appropriation, if you notice that there was nothing budgeted initially in the budget for this, as you pointed out. At the request of the mayor, after talking with him, we added that, and I think he's communicated with all of you, so we have added it to the appropriation. There are other things in there, for example, the sewer rebate program, which was added in after the budget was approved by the council, so we've included that in the appropriation. The next step would be to draft a budget amendment, assuming you approve it in the appropriation. We would draft a budget amendment to include that, also to include the sewer rebates, and to include a few other things that have been proposed and included in the appropriation, but that are planned expenditures, but were not included in the original budget. So they would diminish that. That's where it's coming from. They would diminish that fund balance, which I have talked about frequently. So, you know, and it could very well be this is a worthwhile expense, but that is, to answer your question, that is in fact where that would come from.
Mr. Hoblet.
Mayor, I just had a few comments in order of the interest of furthering the conversation. I believe Mr. Conzo answered a few more of those. That is, I know this is the creation of a line item for matching grant opportunities, and you said that's already in the appropriations, which is yet to be voted upon.
Yes, I guess that should occur within the next hour, we would hope.
Yes. So that is to be voted upon here shortly. So I guess this is really just an information for the council, because they're about ready to undertake a vote for that, and the amount's already established in there.
Yes, it is, and then subsequent to that, as I was talking about, we would have a budget amendment, as you know, but not everybody here may know. A budget is what you plan to spend. An appropriation is, as you know very well, a limit on what you can spend, provided that there is the money available to pay it. And that's, we go year by year. Sometimes we get new people on the council, or people who were here a year ago but don't remember that. Or sometimes people that have been around for many years don't remember that. But that's the difference between appropriation and budget.
Okay. Ms. McClellan, and then Mr. Reimer.
I just wondered if Mr. Hoblet needed anything from the council in order to pursue the people that he's talking to right now, perhaps about making a
No,
new
I
strategic
mean,
plan.
I was going to have a conversation with the mayor, Ms. O'Donoghue, afterwards, and kind of explain as to what he does. I mean, I can explain right now, to be honest, if you would like, but we were talking about an appropriations item. I don't want to keep muddying the conversation up. You know?
Well, keep in mind, as he's having the conversation, that's another expense that you've got to pay for, because they won't do it for free. So I know John's got a lot of friends, but I don't think we're getting that one pro bono.
I wouldn't assume that.
So, yeah, I mean, you can explain that if you'd like, Mr. Hoblet.
Okay, sure. His name's Art Municipal Services. He was the city administrator for Effingham for a number of years. He retired, and he has these. He provides services to other municipalities. He comes in. I don't want to say, it seems like to me his price. I've seen from some other municipalities about 10,000 or so. I don't know if that's a pill that the council is willing to swallow in regards to getting a strategic plan, or how much the previous one cost, if anything was done by the college. But he comes in, he sets up meetings with leadership, community leadership within the community, brings them in, workshops first with the community in those meetings in regards to what they would like to see for in that respective strategic plan. After conducting 2 to 4 meetings, I believe, because he has various breakdowns of various groups that he has, then he will ask, or at least request, what I've seen in the past, special municipal meeting settings to be set, usually to the tune of 2. Where he'll come in and he'll work with you guys, and because it has to be a special meeting because you are all here, and so therefore for open meetings, so it would be an open meeting. But then he would also workshop with you guys for a number of hours, because that's what it takes. It takes a number of hours. I've seen anywhere from like 2 meetings to 4 meetings where it could take 2 to 4 hours to work to get a strategic plan going. And then he'll formulate said strategic plan after working with you guys and working with the community, and present it for adoption if you guys so desire. So that's kind of the work he does in that regard. And that's just kind of the top level from what I've gathered. I might be misrepresenting things. He's not here right now to give you his pitch, I guess you could say. But that's kind of one from my observations, what I've seen. So,
Mr. Reimer.
My question is to Mr. Gonzo. We're already almost up to into August already, and is this the right time to do this? I'm not against the idea, but would we better off? I hate to kick the can down the road again, but we've got a lot of different things going on with now the sewer plant and all. Is this something that we strongly this winter talk about and get it in next year's budget? I mean,
Are you talking about the strategic
Yeah,
plan or
yeah.
the matching expenditures?
The
for
actual
grants?
project.
well, the strategic plan or any of it, as far as,
Well,
I mean, got a lot of money. We're sending in a lot of different directions. In your opinion, are we financially strong enough to?
I think we can, if there's a benefit to it, if it's likely to result in a substantial grant,
Right.
I think it's probably.
So it's an
worth
if,
spending.
and
Yeah, it's a lot of variables, but I mean, I think setting it aside for that purpose, whether you spend it or not, is probably a good idea at this point. Right, right, and that's a good point, and you go back over past several, or many years of appropriations and budgets, with every fund or every sub-fund within the general fund, you find that department heads generally have not spent, have never spent, with one exception, have never spent the entire amount in the appropriation or even within their budget. So
if we go through with it, then you're comfortable with?
yeah,
Right now at this
right
time.
now, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't go much
Crazy
beyond
with
that.
it.
Yeah. I think you can really overdo this stuff if you're not careful.
Mr. Parrott.
Yeah, so, Ashley, just some thought, I guess. So when you look for grants, what I think I would, and you probably already done this, I would ask how many awards did they award last time? What's the award? How many applications were awarded, and then how many did they receive last time? And so you kind of got an idea. If we apply, what's the likelihood that we'll get it, right? To Chuck's point, what's the results? Can we, if we budget it, and we apply for it, we just don't want to be sitting on $32,000 engineering, for 5-10 years, and it's just probably not going to get done. So I think I would do that. I would also try to FOIA any of their applications that were received in the past, and try to see if you can see how they were written as well. I don't know what type of grants, how you write them. Is it just something that you just fill in, or, exactly? And it doesn't matter if on this particular one, any of them that you applied for, just to kind of get an idea of how how somebody that was awarded a grant, how they wrote their particular grant, if you can get that type of information.
So I actually kind of did that. I reached out with Mrs. Straight over at the Park District and spoke with her about the OSLID grant that they applied for. Went through that whole process with her. She shared her information from other boards that have applied and gotten the grant, what they had to do. She actually provided me with the grant that they submitted to look over. So I've kind of already done that on that one.
Did I miss anybody that wanted to speak? Okay.
But-
Ms. Rolfs?
If we said, okay, we would like to at least start the fund out with $5,000 rather than jump into 32, can we do that, or does it have to be the 32,000?
The likelihood of it being an effective tool at $5,000 is not good.
Well, I would just throw in out an amount.
So I will tell you, whenever we talk about these things, and I talk with the treasurer before we end up on numbers and things like that, we throw a number out, then I go to the treasurer, we have a conversation about whether that's even feasible. Sometimes he clutches his chest and other times he doesn't. But that's the barometer, right? But with this one, when we sat in that meeting and I talked with Chuck, keep in mind, this is just appropriations. It's saying this is the limit that we could spend, not that we're going to. We put in the appropriations, I believe, 100,000, but it could go down to 50,000 and still be effective as a trial to see if this line item approach will work and give Ashley the tools she needs to apply for grants. Keep in mind, no matter what, if the council does support this request, no matter what you put in it, no projects will move forward without your approval. So you still have the opportunity to say yes or no.
I will bring forth all of them, the projects or any ideas that I might
Okay.
have.
Yeah, you
prior
will vote on
to
everything.
I think
touching
that a
it.
choice.
Yeah. So, yep. So, if the council doesn't feel comfortable with what's been put in appropriations, you can reduce that number. But I guess you can have a conversation with Mr. Conzo about how he feels, although I think he said that we should be okay with that number that's been presented at this time. Is that, Ms. Rolfs, does that help answer your question?
I believe so.
Okay. So this is already in appropriations, so I don't know that we technically need to have it put on an agenda because it's gonna be coming up in the special voting meeting, correct?
Yes, I mean, unless there's a specific proposal to spend it, that you would have to do, but as far as having it, just as you described, to be set aside in the appropriation.
Yeah, I think the request will come at a later date regarding the 8th Street project that Ms. Metelko's talking about, but it was good that we had that conversation.
But as Ms. Telco just said, if we all have other projects or have heard of other things, we can bring them to her and she'll look them.
That way I can,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yep.
look for a grant that would support that.
She, for instance, another project, not a popular topic and everybody's got mixed opinions on it, but EV chargers. EV chargers is a big thing right now, especially when it comes to tourism. And we've had multiple conversations with people in the community, even with Mr. Grau. And quite simply, we don't have the legwork done up front on these EV charger grants that are out there, and there's plenty of them out there. We have ideas on where we could put them throughout the community to be most effective, but we haven't moved forward because it involves some engineering, it involves some electrical estimates. I mean, there's a lot that goes into those, even on a cost-effective approach to EV chargers. So we've been talking about other things, but yes, if you have a project, get with Ms. Metelko and stop by her office and share them with her. We will move forward on the strategic plan. Mr. Hoblet, can you get us engaged with your contact on that? Okay. All right. Any other discussion? Okay, couple of announcement items. There is a ribbon cut on Tuesday, July 30th at the west gate of the fairgrounds at 9 a.m. So if you can be present for that,
I'm
would
sorry,
love
when did you say?
Tuesday,
Tuesday.
the 30th at 9 a.m. at the west gate. So if you can be present for the one out by the frontage road, yeah. Every year when at the first day of the fair, they do a ribbon cut to officially open the fair up. And they invite elected officials out if they'd like to be involved. And then also, I just wanted to take a minute and we've talked a lot about it over the last few months, but I want to thank everybody that had a hand or an involvement in Third Fridays. Third Fridays I think this year was probably our best year. And it continues to grow, and it's because we have good volunteers, we've got good committee members, we've got the support of the council in continuing to see this as a worthwhile investment in the community. And so the department heads, each one of them plays a role in some respect. Saw the fire department had their firehouse set up again this week. We took pictures of it. Police always has a presence, and streets and alleys and sewer help us out tremendously. So that being said, just thank you to anybody that had an involvement in that. Does anybody else have an announcement they'd like to make? Mr. Bounds.
So the last discussion we had on solar, I've got a little update on the community solar portion. The application for the expansion out there is finally under review from Ameren, so hopefully we'll have some more details here shortly.
Okay, anybody else? Ms. Rolfs and then Mr. Conzo.
Yes, I've had some solicitors come by, and I think that I would appreciate if Chief Meister would give some directions to everybody so hopefully they can hear it over the television also as to what you should do when you have these people come to your door.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, here in the last couple of weeks, we've had an increased call for service volume due to solicitors in town. We have identified several groups that have not, I shouldn't say several groups, several individuals, one main group that has not been permitted by the city. They were provided with a warning at the first contact that we had with them, and now we've been issuing citations. We will continue to do so. So for those solicitors, if they're listening, stop. For the residents of Lincoln, if you don't accept solicitors, don't answer your door. It's a perfectly acceptable reason to call the police department. Just call dispatch and ask for an officer to respond for solicitors in your area. But the safest bet is always just don't answer them. They'll get bored and they'll go away and find somebody else to bother. But we are welcoming to reports of solicitors in your area, and we'll respond as soon as we have somebody available to do so. Along the same lines, the mayor and I have spoke about creating some signage for residents that prohibit soliciting on their property, and we're still in the works of designing that, having those printed off. When that project is complete, I believe our plan right now tentatively is to offer those for sale for $1. That way somebody doesn't come in and pick up 100 of them, and then we're out of them and nobody gets a chance to get one of their own. So when that's done, I'll announce that, and they'll be available at the police station at 710 Fifth Street.
And on top of that, there is a page on the city website. So if someone shows up at your door and you're not sure if they are permitted or not, you can go to that page, and the clerk's office updates that page as permits are issued and permits expire. So that's a good tool to have. I've seen it shared on Facebook a few times as well. Ms. Rolfs, anything else? Any other announcements? Mr. Conzo?
Thank you, Mayor. Two things. One, Mayor mentioned the county fair and the ribbon cutting on Wednesday at noon. But prior to that, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, there will be, I'm sorry, you said Tuesday at noon, not Wednesday. Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, they'll be racing in the grandstand at 1:30, as there usually is. So if you enjoy watching horses race, that's a good place to go.
Yep.
And the other thing I wanted to talk about has to do with the balance in the general fund. As you know, interest rates are more favorable now and have been for the past several months than they had been for many years. When I first got here and started doing this in 2010, the interest rates were real low. Prior to that, the city had put a portion of its general fund in certificates of deposit. And the way in which they did that was the treasurer, Mr. Plotner, would contact local banks and see what the rates were. And they sometimes, they're generally very close, but when you're talking about this much money, quarter of a percent or 0.2% can make a big difference in the yield. So what I would recommend doing is, council is agreeable to this, would be taking $1 million of that or less and putting it in certificates of deposit through local banks. Probably not. These would not be longer term investments. These would be completely liquid investments, which means you could take them out before they're due, which results in an interest penalty, but substantial penalty. But you could do that, and in any case, these would be certificates of deposit that would be 6, 7, 9 months, and they would be laddered, so you wouldn't have them all going in at the same time and coming due at the same time. So if you needed the money from the one you put in at 6 months, you would have that, and then be another one that was maybe 7 months, another one that was 8 months or 9 months, depending on what the banks offer, because they vary from time to time, and it just depends on what the financial institutions offer at that particular time. So they'd be laddered. Obviously, they're insured, and they are liquid. We aren't going to spend, if we spend down to that last million, as I think some of you would like to do, we're in big trouble. So this, I think this is a good approach, too, to put this in the fund. This is still considered part of the general fund, as are the investments that I report to you on every month. Those investments are not local. Those are with IMET, which is a statewide group, and it's done pretty well. We started out with $500,000 in that several years ago. So these now typically CDs paying right around that 4.75 to 5.25%. Are we boring you, Mr. Bateman? Oh,
Meeting at 7 o'clock.
I understand. In any case,
Point, that's all.
what's your point, if any? Okay. In any case, these are liquid investments, and they're with local banks. They're going to be 4.75 to 5.25% yield, I would guess. Sometimes with public funds, they give you a greater yield than they do with private funds. And the amount, too, is greater, so that tends to result in a better payoff on the interest. Whereas keeping it in, what we have it in now is a business checking account. You're getting 0.5%, so it's considerable difference. So as the council is, we don't have to vote on it. Now, what I would do, if you're agreeable to it, is I'd get rate quotations from the local banks, and probably from CEFCU, and bring that back at the next committee of the whole meeting, which is 3 weeks from tonight.
Do we get a monthly report then on the?
Yeah, they'll be on, it'll be on the treasurer's report, like the IMET investment is. Be the same thing. And for purposes of the audits, as I said, those are part of the general fund balance.
Okay.
So you'll bring that back at the next Cal?
I will.
Council, okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Conzo. Okay, anybody else have an announcement they'd like to share? Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Ms. Rolfs made the motion. Mr. Eimer second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Meeting is adjourned at 7:14 PM.
Kevin, since you didn't